Yeah. Hello everybody and welcome to the War Room. This one is for this weekend's UFC Fight Night main event between Islam Makhachev and Bobby Green. Okay, so of course this was supposed to be Makhachev against Beneil Dariush, and that would have been a fantastic fight. But Bobby Green has just come off one of the best performances of his career. So I'll be honest, I'm quite excited to see him in this situation. I mean, this is a very different fight, and it's a very big ask for him. But there are certain things about Bobby Green's game and Bobby Green's style and persona and attitude that I think might be quite interesting playing into this fight. Okay, let's first of all have a look at the stats. So Bobby Green, 29, 12 and 1, massive amount of experience. Makhachev, 21 and 1, so still loads of experience. One loss on his record is the difference between 12 losses on Bobby Green's record. Now, Bobby Green's been fighting for a good long while. I remember him floating around the California scene way back in the day when I was living there training at Legends. And he was, everyone knew that he was a handful. Everyone knew that he was a brawler. If you were drawn up against him, it was going to be like a street fight, and that's why people loved watching him. He always drew loads of attention. Now, his style has never really been kind of crafted in a way where it's super disciplined, but that's what works well for him, because as we saw in his last fight against Nasrat Haqparast, it's his hands down, confident, take a shot and watch our slip out the way that gets him into a lot of ranges where he can do damage to his opponents. Now, when he does his best is when he's got someone that stands in punching range and is not too concerned about trying to clinch him or kick him or anything. He likes someone that will stand and trade boxing with him in small gloves, because usually he's got a speed advantage and usually he's got a reaction time advantage, and he also has the confidence to be able to hang his head out there and use it as bait to draw his opponent's shots. So as we saw in the Haqparast fight, and as we've seen in several other of his fights in the past, he allows them to go first, and then he slips and steps back in with counters, and he, stands inside their range and waves his head from side to side and talks shit to them and draws their attack, and then they swing and he goes, whoo, bam, bam, bam. And as soon as people get caught in this cycle where he's now got the confidence and he's got your timing and now he's mugging you off and he's trash talking you, it's really difficult for those kind of fighters to get back on top of that fight, because most of the time they're generally swinging for his head because they can't hit him. We talked about the same with Adesanya. People, they have a tendency when they can't hit somebody in the head to try nothing else but to hit them in the head. And that works really well in Bobby Green's favor. Now, the difference between Haqparast and Makhachev is that Makhachev's got a good kicking game. He's a well-disciplined southpaw striker. I would say of all of the guys with that wrestling background and pedigree that he represents, the Dagestani team, I would say he's probably got the best striking out of all of them. Not because it's the most diverse, not because it's the most advanced, but because it's the most polished and the most confident. So when he's coming up against Bobby Green, if you're Islam Makhachev, you're coming up against Bobby Green, you're going to watch that Haqparast fight and you're going to think to yourself, well, I'm not going to stand there and get punched. I'm going to be throwing kicks, I'm going to be moving in and out of range, and I'm certainly going to be trying to wrestle him. That could be real problematic for Bobby Green, because that gives him a lot of things to think about and a lot of reasons to move his feet as well as his head. And if he has to move his feet, he can't move his head nearly as well. So as I think about this fight, and as you all think about this fight, and as we all know what to expect in this fight, the expectation is that Makhachev is going to kind of slowly walk him down behind a good barrage of kicks, soften him up with strikes, and not being too much of a risk to take him down. But as soon as there's an opportunity to get his hands on him, he's going to grab him, he's going to throw him around, he's going to put him on the floor, and he's most likely going to either put him on his back and tap him with an arm triangle, or he's going to take his back and tap him with a rear naked choke. Interestingly, Bobby Green has 8 submissions on his record. I'm going to check that to make sure that's right for you. Interestingly, Bobby Green has 8 submissions on his record. He also has 10 knockouts, so there are two sides to Bobby Green's game. Now, 29 wins on his record. He's stopped 10 of them by knockout, and he's stopped 8 of them by submission. Of his submissions, you're talking rear naked chokes and you're talking guillotines predominantly. But the thing that he hangs his hat on in this fight are his hands. we look at his Al Iaquinta fight, and Al Iaquinta did a very similar thing to what Makhachev's going to do. He's going to try and get him up against the fence where he can shoot him into the fence. Now, Iaquinta's much more of a boxer. He hangs heavy on his lead leg. He doesn't use kicks very often unless he's throwing them to the legs. So that made him a bit easier to read for Bobby Green, and he caught him perfectly with his counter punches as he was stepping in. And if there's going to be a way that Bobby Green wins this fight, in my opinion, it's going to be that. And it might not be one shot and he knocks him out. It might be a case of him doing that consistently over the fight once he's established his control. Like if he can coerce Makhachev into trading strikes with him, then he's going to try and force him to miss as much as possible, which might then make Makhachev more determined to try and hit him. I don't think that's the case, but I think that's what Bobby Green needs to hope is the best case scenario. If Makhachev comes out and decides he's going to try and wrestle, then I would expect Bobby Green to have good scrambles, good ability to scramble back to his feet, to defend the early takedowns and to make it difficult. But let's be honest, I think Makhachev, once he gets his hands on him, it's only a matter of time before he puts him on the floor. You know, Makhachev has always impressed me with his wrestling, and we go through his record and you see the guys that he's beaten, you see the way that he's beaten them, he's manhandled them, knocking out Gleison Tibau. One of the best performances for me was against Arman Tsarukyan, and that was Tsarukyan's UFC debut in St. Petersburg, Russia. It was a wrestling extravaganza. It was one of the best grappling matches in an MMA fight I've ever seen. It's definitely worth you going to watch it, but that shows you where Makhachev's wrestling is at. And that chain of wrestling that he throws at his opponents, I think will be just too much for Bobby Green. I think we're going to see Bobby Green taken out of his game. I think he's going to look very uncomfortable at points in the fight. And I think if he's got the toughness and determination, the best he can hope for is to get to the end of the fight without getting submitted. The one counter to that, of course, is the one loss on Makhachev's record. Now, there is a caveat. First of all, it's worth remembering that this was a very different Islam Makhachev going into that fight. At the time going into the Adriano Martins fight, he was 12-0. He was undefeated. He was emerging in the shadow of Khabib, and everyone was like, this kid's next. You think Khabib's good, wait till you see what Islam Makhachev's going to be able to do in a few years' time. And that was the vibe that Khabib and the whole team were giving us as well. He was too overzealous in the Adriano Martins fight, and if you remember the knockout, it was because he was crashing forward and Martins drifted away and caught him with a counter hook. That, to me, is a good lesson for a fighter that was a little too overzealous, and he's not made that mistake since. Like, he's not been running onto shots, he's been a lot calmer and a lot more measured with his striking. It would have probably been better for Bobby Green had Adriano Martins' fight never happened, because then that lesson may not have been learned, and he might still be vulnerable to that one-punch shot when he comes crashing forward too overzealous. But that was a little wake-up call for him, and of course he was devastated, and that's going to be motivation through his next 11 fights and training camps. But the change that it would have made in his mentality is, I'm not putting myself at that kind of risk anymore, and he's going to identify Bobby Green as being a potential threat to that. So he's not going to make those mistakes again. I think Bobby's going to have to be really sensible about how he approaches this fight, how he expends his energy, and when he's throwing his shots. Because if he overreaches, he's going to get tied up. If he gets tied up, he may miss his only opportunity in that round to land something before he's taken down, and then he spends the next 4.5 minutes scrambling back to his feet. Let's just have a quick look at the UFC stats. So, 21-1, 29-12-1 for Bobby Green. The height is the same. The reach is an inch for Bobby Green, so we can write that off as well. Their stats start to really differ when it comes to their striking and grappling, of course. So Bobby Green, strikes landed per minute, 5.93 compared to 2.21 for Makhachev, which favors Bobby Green in the fact that he's landing volume, but favors Makhachev because he's a bit more accurate, 58% accuracy compared to 51. He also takes a considerable amount less shots than Bobby Green does. Now, Bobby Green takes 3.65 shots per minute over a 15-minute fight, and Makhachev's usually taking less than one shot, 0.79. striking defense is better for Makhachev as well. So this all speaks to his ability to control and approach the fight very maturely, not overextend himself, which is really what Bobby Green tries to get you to do with his trash talking and with his head movement. I feel like Makhachev's just so focused at this stage of his career that he's not going to slip up like he did against Martins. And I think that, Bobby Green's just had a great 15-minute performance. He'll feel very confident coming off that fight that, he's found his groove, he's got his timing, and he's going to find his moment in the fight. But after 10 minutes has passed and you've been on the floor and you've been smashed up against the fence and you've not landed anything, you start to think, there's a point where he might start to reason with himself, well, I got the win bonus last week, at least I'll get the money for showing up this time around. That's the kind of game that Makhachev has. He breaks people psychologically. So average takedown per 15 minutes again is swayed in Makhachev's favor, 3.37 compared to 1.36 for Bobby Green. 66% takedown accuracy and 88% takedown defense. 1.3 for submissions as well. And again, this is something that we've seen develop for Islam Makhachev. Bobby Green's a good wrestler with good hands. Makhachev's a good wrestler with good striking and good grappling. Like, he has two facets to his game, two finishing elements to his game. There's no reason why he can't compete with a striking game of Bobby Green, as long as he doesn't get drawn into a boxing match. When Bobby Green comes up against someone like Lando Venata that throws a bunch of kicks, it makes him a bit uncomfortable because he can't settle. So there is definitely a way for Makhachev to beat him on the feet as well. But the difference is, when Makhachev takes him down and once he's on the floor, Bobby Green is only going to spend a certain amount of time before he starts to thrash and move and scramble and maybe give his back or an arm triangle in the process. Huge respect to Bobby Green for taking this. And when your record is, 29-12, like, you can roll the dice on these kind of things. You can take these opportunities. Now, just think for a moment if Bobby Green lands an uppercut as Makhachev's stepping in, or Makhachev comes wading in with a couple of shots and Bobby Green drifts away, catches him with that right hook like Adriano Martins did. All of a sudden, Bobby Green finds himself in a very interesting position in the division because, first of all, people like watching Bobby Green fight because of his style. Second of all, he's just handed Islam Makhachev his second only loss, which puts him in a real strong position to get fight offers from everybody in the division who now wants to fight Bobby Green so they don't have to fight Islam Makhachev. He would do the division a favor. He would take pressure off a lot of the top guys if he wins this fight. So they'll be watching and hoping Bobby Green just manages to land that shot because he's a much safer bet in the future than Islam Makhachev is. He's going to get better every time he's out there. I think the reality is that Makhachev is going to show his wrestling game in this. And I think Bobby Green is going to show his toughness and he's going to show his durability. And I think he's going to have a few tricks that he's picked up over the years as well from being, a 40-whatever fight veteran, of pro MMA. But I think skills pay the bills. Kicking, wrestling, back taking and submissions. Respect to Bobby Green for taking this. It's a roll in the dice. It's a roll of the dice and it's a shot in the dark. But the way that we saw him perform the other week, this might be his time to really surprise everybody. I'm excited for this one. It's going to be a banger.